So, however, despite all such things, despite the global south visit, जहाँ पे Prime Minister Brazil और Argentina दोनों होकर आए हैं अभी, है ना? But you find a question on LAC was not asked, rather a repetition of question on the theme of Africa. Man originated in Africa and then moved, spread out throughout the world. So globalization is as old as mankind itself on the earth. अगर हमें ज़्यादा नहीं भी पता कुछ, तो हमें ये पता है कि the digital public infrastructure of India, which we call the public stack, is becoming quite famous across the world. We are partnering with countries and other countries want to learn from India's DPI. तो ऐसा क्या खास था WTO के dispute settlement mechanism में that it became so very important?
Congratulations on clearing UPSC 2024. Watching you succeed is really inspiring.
Thanks. I have been in your shoes. I know how overwhelming the start feels.
Exactly. There's so much to cover, I don't even know where to begin.
I felt the same. That's why I joined the GS Foundation course by Vision IAS, which offers structured classes, expert faculty, and regular revision. It gave me clarity and momentum.
And you stayed consistent with it?
Yes, I followed the complete roadmap offered by the course. If you're aiming for 2026, start with this course. It offers you holistic coverage with every stage of the exam covered seamlessly. This is where your journey will truly begin.
Got it. I will definitely explore the course. Where can I find the details?
Just visit their website or call on the given numbers.
Good evening, all of you. Fine, so we are here to discuss the GS 2 paper for mains this year. So in mains 2025, the GS 2 paper, yes, which comprises polity, governance, social justice, and IR. Fine, as far as IR is concerned, yes, so once again you find 4 questions that came for IR, so a pattern which is consistent since 2015. Yes, since 2015 every year 4 questions, 2 questions are 10 marks and 2 questions are 15 marks each. Fine, so this year's, have you gone through the question paper? What did you feel about the paper? Did you go through the questions of IR? Yes, first is about India-Africa digital partnership. Yes, next question is about with waning of globalization, post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Yes. Third question. Energy security constitutes the dominant kingpin of India's foreign policy. So basically energy security and while India's overarching influence in Middle Eastern countries, how would you integrate energy security with India's foreign future, with India's foreign policy trajectory in the coming years. And then the reform process in UN. So if you, what are the themes? India-Africa, digital partnership. Yes, second question was on globalization, deglobalization and emphasis on sovereign nation states. Third question is about energy security and how do we link it to India's foreign policy trajectory. Yes, and the last question is about the UN reform process. So basically what we find that no bilateral relation whatsoever has been asked. India-Africa is also not bilateral, it is India's continental policy, India's engagement with the entire continent of Africa. Of course, when we study Africa, we study it from continental perspective and not from bilateral perspective. Bilateral perspective में सिर्फ neighborhood and global powers पढ़ा जाता है. Otherwise we do study India-Israel, India-Iran bilateral ties, maybe a brief reference to India-Saudi Arabia ties. As such, there is no other bilateral relation except for the global powers, the immediate neighborhood, and as I told you, Israel and Saudi Arabia. उससे ज़्यादा अगर पढ़ना चाहे कोई तो इंडिया फ्रांस पढ़ लेगा, इंडिया UK in context of the FTA negotiations and the recent signing of CETA. Yes, so we as such, but you find that none of the questions were from the bilateral relations. However, what we see, और generally क्या होता है, year on year pattern ये है कि bilateral relations आते हैं. Yes, neighborhood पे आए, that is not essential, but we do expect one question on the neighborhood, at least we think that way. Yes, and then on global powers, India-US, India-Russia, maybe a trilateral engagement, how India-US relations impact India-Russia relations, India-Russia engagement, its impact on Russia-China relations, है ना, उस तरह का कुछ एक framework we do expect there. But this time around there was no such question. It was on broad themes that they have asked. India-Africa previously twice, since 2013, they have twice asked questions on India-Africa relations. So once again, you find that post-COVID-19, Government of India's emphasis on engaging with Africa reduced somehow. Yes, prior to that, until 2019, Modi government was quite frequently traveling to Africa, and Africa was in much news, and we used to cover Africa in our general classes, in our foundation classes. But since 2019, the focus on Africa reduced substantially, only to catch up maybe in the last year. Yes, global south पे भी emphasis है ना, 2023 से उस context में, and once again they have not asked a question on say Latin America. Generally हम Africa और Latin America दोनों पढ़ा करते थे पहले, ठीक है, but because government of India was not emphasizing those areas, we left them out from our discussion as far as GS foundation course is concerned. But anyways, you find that once again they have not gone towards Latin America, they have not asked a question on Latin America, despite है ना अभी since 2023 Argentina and Brazil है ना, they have been, हमारा जो foreign policy है government of India का, it is a tiered approach. We follow a tiered approach to foreign policy. उसका मतलब क्या है? Yes. Since in fact, since the adoption of new economic policy, 1991 में जब हमने new economic policy adopt किया, yes, the foreign policy was also revised. Yes, it was also revised. What is the reason? One reason we can say economic goals are important components of national interest, and therefore foreign policy will be geared to achieving economic goals. So इस context में revision. Second बता दो क्या होगा 1991 में, क्यों हमने revise किया अपना foreign policy? World order changed. Yes, there is disintegration of USSR. Yes, and therefore government came out with a new foreign policy vision, which is defined in terms of concentric circles. है ना, तो आज तक हमारा ये concentric circle वाला approach holds true. Fine. So in the center, the dot represents India. This is India. The first circle is India's immediate neighborhood. जो भी ये neighborhood first policy की countries हैं, they are covered under it. Yes, the second circle would be global powers and India's extended neighborhood. Extended neighborhood, and the third circle is rest of the countries. Rest of the countries. So है ना, ये Pacific Island वगैरह जो भी है ना, Oceania वगैरह सारे they will come under the third concentric circle, including Latin America and Caribbean. However, in 2023, since India was hosting the G20 summit, so G20 के members हैं Brazil and Argentina. Yes, so they were placed in the second concentric circle. They were taken out from the third concentric circle and placed under the second concentric circle. और थर्ड कंसेंट्रिक सर्कल का दूसरा फीचर क्या है? एक तो मैंने बताया इसमें रेस्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीज़ है ना, जो ये फर्स्ट और सेकंड में नहीं आए, उसके अलावा जो भी दुनिया की कंट्रीज़ है ना, दे विल कम, जैसे कि अफ्रीका वगैरह ना, अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज़ वगैरह, दे विल कम अंडर द थर्ड कंसेंट्रिक सर्कल. Of course, few countries of Africa we do emphasize on bilateral level पे, जैसे कि से साउथ अफ्रीका वगैरह. बट जो थर्ड कंसेंट्रिक सर्कल का वो नेक्स्ट फीचर ये है कि द एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर डज नॉट डायरेक्टली डील विथ दीज कंट्रीज, है ना. द मिनिस्टर ऑफ स्टेट डील्स विथ, है ना, इज प्राइमरली रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर कंडक्ट अ फॉरेन पॉलिसी विज़-विज़ द थर्ड कंसेंट्रिक सर्कल कंट्रीज, बिकॉज द, है ना, देयर हैज़ टू बी डिविजन ऑफ work. So you find that the external affairs minister, the foreign minister will be taking care of the first and the second concentric circle. The third concentric circle is taken care of minister of state of external affairs. So you find that, as I was telling you, in 2023 they were elevated, Brazil and Argentina were elevated to the second concentric circle. Fine. So, however, despite all such things, despite the global south visit जहाँ पे Prime Minister Brazil और Argentina दोनों होकर आए हैं अभी, है ना, but you find a question on LAC was not asked, rather a repetition of question on the theme of Africa. Fine. But when it comes to Africa, you find a very particular question vis-a-vis the digital partnership. India-Africa digital partnership was asked. Fine, we will get into that. Next, if you look, the next question was about deglobalization, which has been much in news, and especially with Trump getting elected. You find there is a lot of emphasis on deglobalization. Globalization was about what? Globalization, is it new, is it old phenomena? Globalization नया phenomena है या पुराना phenomena है? Yes? पुराना है. पुराना when? So did it start globalization? Did it happen only in 1991? नहीं, अभी भी हो रहा है, लेकिन ये 1991 से ही शुरू हुआ ये phenomena. It is as old as human beings on the planet, and a man did not originate at all places on earth simultaneously which are inhabited today. Yes, man originated in Africa and then moved, spread out throughout the world. So globalization is as old as mankind itself on the earth, on the planet. However, the globalization that we witnessed in 1990 is primarily economic in nature. Yes, है ना, globalization के बहुत सारे impacts होते हैं, cultural, है ना, cultural है, political है. Yes, so there will be various impacts of globalization. However, the globalization of 1990 इसका primary distinctive emphasis has been on economics and in terms of free trade. Yes, there has been emphasis on free trade. The organization that we see, yes, with its emphasis on free trade. उसका एग्जाम्पल हम दे सकते हैं WTO, है ना, WTO which was created in 1995. Now free trade का मतलब क्या है? Tariffs have to be reduced. Tariffs have to be reduced. लेकिन आज के दिन क्या हुआ है, जब से अमेरिका फर्स्ट या ट्रम्प आए हैं, वो टेरिफ रेसिप्रोकल टेरिफ्स इम्पोज कर रहे हैं. यस, अमेरिका फर्स्ट पॉलिसी है, इंडिया पे पेनल्टी टेरिफ्स भी हैं, है ना, ऑल सच थिंग्स. तो यू फाइंड दैट we are talking, in fact the economic survey has also spoken about geo-economic fragmentation. ठीक है, तो उस context में हम ये question बहुत ज़्यादा expect कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि ये theme I think so I have been discussing even in the pre-foundation classes. Yes, that the world is witnessing deglobalization and in fact उसका manifestation क्या है? I keep saying this, that it has been rise of these populist governments, far right political parties का rise, है ना, parties on the right side of the political spectrum are on a rise. Now what is, है ना, BJP for that matter, it is a political party tilted towards the right. Congress was a political party which was located at the center but tilted towards the left. You find, है ना, जो डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प है अभी, फॉर दैट मैटर, इसराइल में द मोस्ट राइटेस्ट गवर्नमेंट इन इसराइल हिस्ट्री. In France, in Italy, you find everywhere there is rise of these rightist parties, even if they are not coming to power. Hungary में, even if they are not coming to power, they are becoming, है ना, they are growing in the vote share. है ना, they are becoming important political parties. What does it indicate? Far right पे जब, या right side पे जितना हम शिफ्ट करते जाएंगे ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल स्पेक्ट्रम, उतना ज़्यादा एम्फेसिस होगा ऑन नेशनल बॉर्डर्स. ठीक है, ये अगर पॉलिटिकल स्पेक्ट्रम है तो मैं क्या बता रही हूँ आपको, डीग्लोबलाइजेशन हमें एक पता चला बिकॉज ऑफ दिस इम्पोजिशन ऑफ टेरिफ्स, है ना. WTO को भी नॉन फंक्शनल कर दिया, इम्पोजिशन ऑफ टेरिफ्स हो गया, तो इस पर काफ़ी डिस्कशन चल रहा है. और दूसरा विच इज़ वन अदर मैनिफेस्टेशन ऑफ, है ना, emphasis on sovereign nationalism is, है ना, rise of, अगर this is the left then this is the right side of the political spectrum. Left में कौन, किन की आइडियोलॉजीज होती हैं? कम्युनिस्ट्स, है ना, द कम्युनिस्ट, द सोशलिस्ट, and they believe in internationalism. You can write this down, है ना, ये इसको रनिंग नोट्स की तरह लिख सकते हो. ऑन द लेफ्ट साइड कौन होते हैं? कम्युनिस्ट एंड सोशलिस्ट, एंड दे बिलीव इन इंटरनेशनलिज्म, है ना. जो कार्ल मार्क्स का आइडिया था, कार्ल मार्क्स का आइडिया क्या था? वर्कर्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड यूनाइट, यू हैव नथिंग टू लूज बट योर चेन्स. तो वो कह रहे थे कि छोड़ दो, नेशनल बॉर्डर्स की बात नहीं कर रहे थे, वो बोल रहे थे वर्कर्स ऑफ रशिया यूनाइट नहीं बोला था, वर्कर्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड यूनाइट. ठीक है, तो वो इंटरनेशनलिज्म की बात करते हैं. यस, एंड जनरली ये लोग वर्कर्स, है ना, या पुअर्स या प्रोलेटेरिएट्स की बात करते हैं, है ना. दे वर्क टुवर्ड्स देयर वेलफेयर. ओप्रेस्ड सेक्शन, इनके लिए ये काम करेंगे. यस, जो राइट साइड ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल स्पेक्ट्रम है, जो फार राइट पे आता है, कौन सा आइडियोलॉजी आता है? यस, इट इज फासिज्म. फार राइट पे जो आइडियोलॉजी होता है वो फासिज्म होता है. फासिज्म का एग्जाम्पल क्या है? हिटलर्स नाजिज्म, यस, एंड मुसोलिनीज, है ना, पॉलिसीज इन इटली. यस, सो यू फाइंड दैट फासिज्म. और फासिज्म का डिफाइनिंग फीचर क्या है? they will lay a lot of emphasis on national borders and national security. Yes, they will emphasize, they will work है ना. अभी फासिज्म को भी छोड़ दें, और फासिज्म भी यही करता है, दे एम्फसाइज कैपिटलिस्ट को सपोर्ट करते हैं ये, है ना. दे आर एंटी इमाइग्रेशन पॉलिसी होगा इनका. यस, एंटी इमाइग्रेशन, दे विल सपोर्ट द कैपिटलिस्ट. तो सपोर्ट द कैपिटलिस्ट कैसे करेंगे? बाय प्रोटेक्टिंग द डोमेस्टिक मार्केट, है ना, बाय क्रिएटिंग टेरिफाइजेशन. यस, फाइन. दे आर एंटी इमाइग्रेंट, दे आर फॉर द कैपिटलिस्ट, नाशनल कैपिटलिस्ट, and they lay a lot of emphasis on national security, है ना. In fact you can relate it to maybe Trump, है ना, Elon Musk के साथ, है ना, Elon Musk supporting him, Department of Government Efficiency formed under Elon Musk, है ना. यहाँ पे भी आप सोच सकते हो, इंडिया के कंटेक्स्ट में भी also there is these allegations, है ना, सच है या नहीं we don't know, but yes that the dominance of the capitalists' interest as far as government policies is concerned, anti-immigration, Trump creating these walls, anti-immigration policies, है ना. He sent back Indians, illegal immigrants, है ना, in shackles. Yes, they will emphasize on national border and national security, that these illegal immigrants are a cause of security threat, he said. Yes, तो इंडिया में भी जब से मोदी जी की गवर्नमेंट है, बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट, दे एम्फसाइज ऑन नेशनल सिक्योरिटी, है ना, डिफेंस एक्सपेंडिचर, बिल्डिंग द बॉर्डर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ऑल सच आइडियाज. सो फाइन. सो यू फाइंड दैट right side of the political spectrum, this is the emphasis, left side, this is the emphasis, and there is rise of this going on around in the world. So this once again highlights, है ना, economic sphere में भी rise of decline of globalization and rise of concerns of national sovereignty, and at political level also rise of national sovereignty that we witness. Fine. So you find that तो इस एरिया से सवाल आया है. General question could be easily answered. If you know the basic ideas, you could write a good enough answer. What was the third question? About about energy security. So why a question on energy security? What is the context of, मिडिल ईस्ट के कंटेक्स्ट में पूछा गया है. एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी जब भी बात करेंगे तो मिडिल ईस्ट बिकम्स ऑटोमेटिकली इंपॉर्टेंट. बट एनीवेज, व्हाई अ क्वेश्चन ऑन एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी देयर? बिकॉज वंस अगेन अ लॉट ऑफ एम्फेसिस, अभी पूरा डिस्कोर्स जो चल रहा है वो एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी पे. इंडिया इंपोर्टिंग ऑयल फ्रॉम रशिया, यस, एंड वी आर जस्टिफाइंग इट एट लो कॉस्ट, है ना, for the benefit of our consumers. We say we are an energy scarce nation, energy deficit nation, and we will do anything which is required to ensure energy security for the emerging economy of ours. But US insists that no, you should not import oil from Russia, penalty tariffs जो लगाए हैं. So this entire discourse about how energy security is vital to India's national interest, to India's foreign policy objectives. Yes. फिर इसको उन्होंने मिडिल ईस्ट से लेकिन लिंक करके पूछा है, तो हम उस पे आंसर लिख देंगे. यस. और लास्ट क्वेश्चन क्या है? यूएन रिफॉर्म्स. तो यूएन रिफॉर्म्स का कंटेक्स्ट क्या है सवाल का? यस, कंटेक्स्ट क्या है? किस लिए सवाल आया यूएन रिफॉर्म पे? Yes, because of various geopolitical conflicts that are going on around the world, be it Russia, Ukraine, be it Israel, Palestine, yes, which have raised questions on the relevance of UN. Yes, they have raised severe questions, है ना. तो in fact, towards the end I was telling कि relevance of UN पे सवाल आ सकता है. Yes, so relevance of UN पे directly सवाल नहीं पूछ के, they have asked a question on reform of UN and how East-West debate is holding back this reform process of UN. Fine, so UN reform पे सवाल आया because relevance of UN is under shadows. under severe shadows. And some sort of a genocidal violence. In fact, genocidal violence is going on in Gaza, and nothing, UN has been able to do nothing. They have been just giving out calls, but nobody is acting on what UN is saying. In fact, जो UN Secretary General है Antonio Guterres, he wanted to visit Gaza, but he was not allowed by Israel. Fine, so there is severe questions on the relevance of UN in this context. Yes, जो multilateralism है that has been breaking down. Fine, so this is the context. So आप देखो चाहे bilateral relation पे नहीं पूछा उन्होंने सवाल, लेकिन जो सवाल पूछा है कहीं ना कहीं उनके context हैं, है ना. अगर इंडिया अफ्रीका, क्योंकि इंडिया अफ्रीका डिजिटल पार्टनरशिप पूछ लिया तो थोड़ा स्पेसिफिक हो गया, बट अदरवाइज यू फाइंड दैट रिमेनिंग 3 क्वेश्चंस है ना वर not completely, not taking you completely by surprise. And if somebody was reading the newspapers, had some decent notes prepared, you should have been in a position to sail through the questions. है ना. तो हमेशा ये होता है कि परफेक्ट आंसर लिखना एग्जामिनेशन हॉल में हर सवाल का माइट बी डिफिकल्ट, बट येस देयर वर क्वेश्चंस है ना दैट यू कुड ईजिली सेल थ्रू, एंड 1 or 2 questions you could actually write very good answers. Maybe the question on deglobalization, maybe the question on UN reform for that matter. And we could have written good answers. Even the question on, अब वही है कितना क्या level of preparation है, energy security पे भी अच्छा आंसर लिखा जा सकता था. Fine. Coming back to the 4 questions that we have. So my point is, keep reading your newspapers and do not be extraordinarily worried. And you will be in a position, if you are doing the basics correct, you will be in a position to go about writing the answers in the examination. First, the first question reads, India-Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnerships. Elaborate. ठीक है, क्या है? India-Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and a long-term institutional partnership. Yes, now let's look at this article which appeared in the newspaper on May 26th. Yes, this very year, this was the article which came. Time for a new India-Africa digital compact. इसका ये पढ़ो. A new India-Africa digital compact anchored in mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. सीधा यहीं से ही सवाल बनाया है. एक आर्टिकल लिया, उस आर्टिकल से सवाल बनाकर दे दिया इन्होंने. Yes, so it is a direct question, है ना. This is an article in the Hindu newspaper, and this person, Veda Vaidyanathan, in fact ये ORF के लिए लिखते हैं, है ना, and he is quite reputed scholar as far as India-Africa relations is concerned. India-Africa relations में काफ़ी लिखते रहते हैं ये, ठीक है. तो व्हाट यू नो, वेदा वैद्यनाथ का अगर कोई आर्टिकल आ रहा है, जनरली वो इंडिया अफ्रीका पे ही लिखते हैं, उसको अच्छे से पढ़ लो. यस, फाइन, सो दैट मच वील डू. एंड so it was a direct question picked up from this very article. They have just framed it little differently. It says that a new digital compact anchored in this could serve as a scalable framework for advancing digital inclusions. Yes, so basically they were calling for a new digital compact, but here the question says that this digital partnership is already achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Yes, elaborate. Fine. So how do we go about writing? Supposedly we did not know that this article exists, and in fact Google search करोगे, पहला ही India Africa relations अगर search करोगे The Hindu करके, तो उसमें ये आ जाएगा लिंक पे, and it is an important article that pops up in the very first page. Anyways, how will you go about writing an answer to this question? India-Africa digital partnership is anchoring. पहले India-Africa digital partnership को देख लेते हैं. Yes, Yes. See, and it is इंडिया अफ्रीका रिलेशंस, तो इंडिया अफ्रीका के बीच में जो डिजिटल पार्टनरशिप हो रही है, अगर हमें ज़्यादा नहीं भी पता कुछ तो हमें ये पता है कि द डिजिटल पब्लिक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऑफ इंडिया विच वी कॉल द पब्लिक स्टैक इज बिकमिंग क्वाइट फेमस अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड. We are partnering with countries and other countries want to learn from India's DPI. Yes, so you find that such cooperation. Also digital नाम है, और जब हम इंडिया अफ्रीका वैसे भी पढ़ते हैं तो उसमें एक पार्टनरशिप है that India has been doing since 2008, a very important partnership, Pan Africa e-network. So under it we provide tele-education and telemedicine, yes, to African countries. ठीक है, तो basically digital partnership की बात हो रही है इंडिया अफ्रीका के बीच में. Now India and Africa are, India has been cooperating with Africa for quite some time. India has been an important developmental partner of Africa. Yes, so over the decades we have been a very, very important developmental partner. How? We provide them subsidized loans, we give them grants, we give them lines of credit. Lines of credit मतलब उधार देते हैं, ठीक है. तो we provide them all this, we engage in skill development, capacity building. Yes, India, in fact India generally एक है ना, India is not per se a donor nation, या हम foreign investment बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं करते, we seek foreign investment, but still then we are the 5th largest investment या investor या investment partner of Africa. ठीक है, I'm just giving you some background. Fine, we are amongst the top 3 trading partners of Africa. Yes, so you find that हम इस तरह का हम डेवलपमेंटल रोल तो प्ले करते ही हैं, उसके अलावा हम इन्वेस्टमेंट भी ऑफर करते हैं, हम ट्रेड भी करते हैं अफ्रीका के साथ, है ना, बाय मे बी डूइंग अवे विथ द टेरिफ्स एंड ऑल सच थिंग्स. सो वी आर बेसिकली सपोर्टिंग द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ अफ्रीका. व्हाई? बिकॉज वी वांट टू बिकम द लीडर ऑफ ग्लोबल साउथ. Yes, so it is part of our south cooperation. This engagement is part of, in fact अगर इस तरह के हम है ना लिख सके आंसर में, साउथ cooperation, India as the leader of, है ना, wanting to become the leader of global south, reclaiming leadership of global south. क्योंकि एक समय था जब हम लीडर ही थे, है ना, जब नैम को हमने co-found किया था, we were the leader of global south. Now we are trying to reclaim that leadership because Russia and China are also contesting to emerge as leaders of global south. Anyway, so this is the background. Now in India-Africa digital partnership. Now as far as Africa or AU, we needed to know that AU has come out with its digital transformation strategy. Yes, a digital transformation strategy for 2020-2030. ठीक है, इन्होंने कहा है, AU, African Union ने कहा है, they would want to adopt and a digital capabilities, develop digital capabilities so as to develop African nations, for the African countries to develop. Plus India in 2018, वैसे भी इंडिया का यही पॉलिसी है, लेकिन 2018 में स्पेसिफिकली क्या हुआ, प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी had traveled to Uganda, and when he was addressing the Ugandan parliament, he gave the 10 principles of India's engagement with Africa. In fact, it is called 10 guiding principles of India's engagement with Africa. और यहाँ पे इन्होंने एम्फसाइज किया है कि जो हमारा इंगेजमेंट होगा विथ अफ्रीका, इट इज गोइंग टू बी डिमांड ड्रिवन, demand driven, need based. Yes, it will be a bottom up strategy. Yes, bottom up क्यों? क्योंकि African countries themselves will set their own national priorities and we will support them in achieving this national priority. So basically we can start the introduction by saying that the basis of India-Africa digital partnership is AU adopting digital transformation strategy and India having a policy of adopting a demands-based approach, need-based approach, bottom-up approach as far as engagement with Africa. और अगर हम ये कोट कर पाएँ कि which was enunciated as part of the 10 guiding principles of India's engagement with Africa. क्योंकि अगर हम ट्रेडिशनल इंडिया अफ्रीका है ना, अगर उसके नोट्स बना के पढ़ेंगे तो उसमें वी विल मेंशन द 10 गाइडिंग प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ इंडियाज एंगेजमेंट विथ अफ्रीका एज वर इनंसिएटेड बाय पीएम मोदी इन his address to the Ugandan parliament. So that is, so these two combine becomes the, क्योंकि उन्होंने सेट किया अपना एजेंडा ऑफ डिजिटल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, सो वी आर देयर टू हेल्प देम अचीव दैट and that has become the basis of India-Africa digital partnership. So context, आप introduction कैसे कर रहे हो? Context of India-Africa digital partnership. Yes, फिर हम बताएंगे कि traditional approach क्या था हमारा. अब हम जा रहे हैं digital partnership पे to help them develop. But उससे पहले हम क्या कर रहे थे? वो थोड़ा सा बता दो. Yes, then how India-Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect. How is it achieving mutual respect? Because it is demand driven, it is need based, it is not top down imposition. We are not looking down at African countries and telling them this is what you need to develop. We are accepting ki what you tell us, we will accordingly help you. So that helps, fosters mutual respect. उनका कैपेसिटी डेवलपमेंट करेंगे तो वो भी हमें रेस्पेक्ट करेंगे. को डेवलपमेंट, हम साथ मिलके उनके लिए डिजिटल सॉल्यूशंस डेवलप करेंगे. यस, को डेवलपमेंट का मतलब क्या है? इंडिया एंड अफ्रीका टुगेदर विल डेवलप डिजिटल सॉल्यूशंस फॉर अफ्रीका एंड लॉन्ग टर्म इंस्टीट्यूशनल पार्टनरशिप. यस, तो इंस्टीट्यूशंस लेवल पे भी है ना, फॉर एग्जांपल इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन ऑफ रिलेशन आपने सुना होगा. यस, तो यहाँ पे एक है इंडिया अफ्रीका फोरम समिट. यस, अदरवाइज जैसे इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन, इंडिया सेंट्रल एशिया डायलॉग, दैट इज इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन ऑफ आवर रिलेशंस. G20 is an institution, yes, of the 20 biggest economies, या 20 most important economies. It is an institution for sure, है ना. लेकिन जब हम ये बोलते हैं, देखो बोल सकते हैं, लेकिन institutionalization when I am using in context of India Africa Forum Summit, basically engaging with a region के context में मैं बोल रही हूँ. तो ये एक shortcoming है that we fail in having any institutionalization of relations, say with India and Latin America, but we have successfully done so in case of India and Africa. India and Central Asia के साथ भी recently किया है. तो ये एक trend है ना, to engage, because हर साल अफ्रीकन यूनियन में 55 कंट्रीज़ हैं. अब हर साल हर 55 मेंबर से नहीं मिल सकते. इफ़ यू हैव सम प्लेटफॉर्म कि ओवर 2-3 years पीरियड यू विल मीट, ऑल द लीडर्स विल मीट ईच अदर. सो यू नीड सच प्लेटफॉर्म्स टू कीप द पॉलिटिकल इंटरेक्शन, डिप्लोमेटिक इंटरेक्शन एट हाई लेवल. फाइन. सो ये फिर कोई और भी इंस्टीट्यूशन के थ्रू अगर हम एंगेज करें तो that is, and then the existing challenges. We will also briefly mention the challenges and then give the conclusion. Now it is a 10 marker, तो challenges को conclusion में ही डाल के हम challenges के साथ conclude कर देंगे. Fine. So this is our introduction. As such ये interlinkage वाला part हो गया. This is the body, the question जो पूछ रहा है वो यही है कि how is it achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Elaborate. We will mention conclusion and conclude the answer accordingly. Fine. Let's see how we have gone about it. As I told you, the context is African Union adopting digital transformation strategy while India follows a demand-driven bottom-up approach under its guiding principles on engagement with Africa, which were enunciated in 2018 during PM Modi's address to the Ugandan Parliament. It forms the basis or bedrock of India-Africa digital partnership. Yes, AU's digital transformation strategy recognizes the need for African government to adopt digital solution to accelerate socio-economic development of Africa. Yes. So traditionally, what has been India's approach? India has provided socially relevant solution through state-led financing. क्योंकि 10 marker है, हम बहुत ज़्यादा लिख नहीं सकते, है ना? तो we have just mentioned this much. Otherwise, you could mention जो भी मैंने mention किया है कि, है ना, grants, loans, subsidized lines of credit and all such things. Then how this digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. So mutual respect कैसे आ रहा है? Because India emphasizes a demand-driven approach responding to African priorities rather than imposing its own models. Yes, unlike the extractive engagement of China. जब भी हम आंसर में कंपैरिजन कर सके वो बेहतर है. तो अफ्रीका के, चाइना वैसे भी है ना इंडिया का काउंटर है और वी वांट टू काउंटर चाइना. So China follows extractive engagement model. India stresses on capacity building. Yes, over building or overcoming dependencies. Then co-development कैसे कर रहे हैं? Digital financial inclusion. Yes, so you have national payment, है ना? Corporation of India, NPCI's collaboration with African nations to adopt UPI based payment system and RuPay cards. So you find Namibia has decided to sign this agreement. India provides tele-education and telemedicine under PAN Africa e-network and a digital public infrastructure experience. Now, so that also we are offering to countries. For example, on national level, हमारे आधार से influence होके 85% of African countries today possess a national ID system underpinned by an electronic database. Fine. For long-term institutional partnership, India-Africa Forum summits that have been going on since 2008. Abhi third summit was held in 2015. Fourth was to be held in 2020, could not be held because of COVID-19, and we have been, there has been a lot of, past 1 year there has been once again an emphasis that as soon as possible we should hold this fourth forum summit. Then capacity building through iTech. Yes, information and technological and economic cooperation है ये. Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation ये एक बहुत पुराना developmental program है which India has been running since 1967-68, and the first few nations to benefit were African countries. African continent में ही launch हुआ और आज के दिन ये पूरे global south के साथ हम engage करते हैं इसके through. Yes, so they have been trained, and you have digital diplomacy. वहाँ पे you have Togo and Zambia have signed MOUs with Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, and IIT Madras has also set up a campus in Zanzibar. Yes, so you find that ये इस तरह का institutional Exim Bank offering LOC, है ना, ये सब institutional partnership के examples हैं. Yes, and challenge क्या है? Challenge ये है कि Africa still, हम digital partnership की बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन digital divide है Africa में. Persistent gender digital divide, persistent rural-urban divide, plus the critical infrastructure such as electricity is also, and a sustainable electricity, a predictable electricity supply is also missing. So these are the bottlenecks as far as digital partnership is concerned. और उसी article से help लेके I have just concluded this partnership has the potential to anchor a global digital commons rooted in equity and sustainability. Yes, basically this approach of ours can motivate India's engagement with rest of the global south. Fine? Fine, so that's the answer. Next is with waning of globalization, post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Elucidate. See, whenever there are sentences, उसके अलावा कुछ है नहीं, इन्होंने कहा है elucidate. तो basically you have to substantiate this very statement. So this statement as such comes in two parts. With waning of globalization, yes, the post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. ठीक है, तो with waning of globalization, the post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Yes, तो अब हम देखते हैं एक बार कि वैनिंग ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन को पहले डिस्क्राइब करें. वैनिंग ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन का मतलब क्या? वैनिंग मतलब डिक्लाइनिंग. यस, तो डिक्लाइन से पहले लेट अस टॉक अबाउट ओरिजिन ऑफ दिस ग्लोबलाइजेशन. सो वी कैन से दैट दिस ग्लोबलाइजेशन दैट इज बीइंग स्पोकन अबाउट स्टार्टेड इन लेट 1980s. It is based on neoliberal policies. देखो, अगर पता है तो ये लिख देना, और इतना बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन होना चाहिए फॉर दैट मैटर. neoliberal policies and powered by ICT revolution. अभी हम किस एरा में रह रहे हैं? नियोलिबरल पॉलिसी के एरा में. लेकिन नियोलिबरलिज्म अभी आई टोल्ड यू कि उसके दो रैमिफिकेशंस हैं ऑफ डिक्लाइनिंग ग्लोबलाइजेशन. एक तरफ हम देख रहे हैं इकोनॉमिक एस्पेक्ट में टेरिफ्स फिर से इम्पोज हो रहे हैं, और पॉलिटिकल एस्पेक्ट में राइज ऑफ फार राइट गवर्नमेंट है. तो व्हाट इज द रीजन why this is happening, why deglobalization is happening? We have discussed the ramification या manifestation, लेकिन रीजन क्या है deglobalization का? Why populist leaders are on rise? ये तो हमेशा से ही था. फ्री ट्रेड मतलब WTO के अंडर गैट्स का भी तो अग्रीमेंट है. ट्रेड इन सर्विसेज, सर्विसेज का मतलब ही है कि प्रोफेशनल्स मूव करेंगे, इमाइग्रेशन होगा. बिकॉज नियोलिबरलिज्म हैज फेल्ड अस, है ना. नियोलिबरलिज्म हैज फेल्ड अस. ग्लोबलाइजेशन विच वाज एक्सपेक्टेड टू लीड टू इकोनॉमिक वेलफेयर. ग्लोबलाइजेशन प्राइमरली किस एरीना में था? मैंने कहा इकोनॉमिक एरीना में था. तो इकोनॉमिक एरीना में था, उसका पर्पस क्या हो सकता है? इकोनॉमिक वेलफेयर, सबका राइज, एवरीबडीज राइज, इकोनॉमिक राइज. बट व्हाट हैज हैपेंड? इट इज इकोनॉमी ऑफ 1%. विद इन कंट्रीज ओनली द रिच हैव बेनिफिटेड, पुअर हैव नॉट बेनिफिटेड. अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड ऑल्सो ओनली रिच बेनिफिटेड, पुअर डिड नॉट बेनिफिट. Yes, so this becomes the reason for deglobalization, क्योंकि neoliberalism is failing us. Yes, and what do you mean by neoliberalism? बस लिख लो, इसमें state is a regulatory state, है ना. ये ना कैपिटल एक्चुअली एक लिबरलिज्म का मूवमेंट है. तो पहले इट स्टार्टेड विथ कैपिटलिज्म, या हम उसको क्लासिकल लिबरलिज्म बोलते हैं. उसके बाद आया वेलफेयर स्टेट. ठीक है, और वेलफेयर स्टेट की जब दिक्कतें हुई कि वो अनसस्टेनेबल बन गया, तो द स्टेट हैड टू बी रोल्ड बैक. स्टेट इतने फंक्शंस नहीं परफॉर्म कर सकता था जितना एक वेलफेयर स्टेट कर रहा था. एंड व्हाट केम टू बी एस्टैब्लिश्ड इज नियोलिबरलिज्म. तो यहाँ पे स्टेट रोल, वेलफेयर स्टेट में state was actively engaged in the economy, was going for active economic management, है ना, PSUs वगैरह. Yes, on the other hand, in neoliberal state, state becomes a regulator. State will not become a participant of the economy only when the market forces become very disruptive. The state will intervene. और जो classical liberalism में है देखो, क्लासिकल लिबरलिज्म, इसमें इसमें स्टेट वॉज मिनिमलिस्ट, इसको बहुत मिनिमल फंक्शंस परफॉर्म करने थे, इसको कोई ज़्यादा फंक्शंस नहीं परफॉर्म करने थे. इट वॉज अ नाइट वॉचमैन स्टेट. Yes, it was a state which believed in laissez-faire. Yes, free market economy. कहीं पे भी स्टेट है ना, कंप्लीट इंडिपेंडेंस टू द मार्केट फोर्सेस. उसके बाद आया वेलफेयर स्टेट. तो स्टेट बिकम्स एक्टिवली इन्वॉल्व्ड इन इकोनॉमी. स्टेट इज प्रेजेंट इन इकोनॉमी क्योंकि वो बहुत सारे फंक्शंस परफॉर्म करेगा. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस देगा, हाउसिंग बेनिफिट देगा, पीडीएस सिस्टम रन करेगा, ऑल सच थिंग्स. एंड व्हेन दिस बिकेम अनसस्टेनेबल, है ना, ये स्टेट बहुत बहुत बड़ा हो गया, ब्यूरोक्रेटाइज्ड हो गया, yes, fiscally unsustainable, then there is rise of neoliberalism. और यहाँ पे state is reduced to the role of a regulator. तो state will intervene only when market forces become extremely disruptive. Otherwise intervene नहीं करेगा economy में, but it will not give a free hand to the economy as in classical liberalism. Fine. So globalization, waning of globalization, because the economic objective of welfare of all was not achieved, rather what happened is rise of economy of 1%. तो हम waning of globalization बताने से पहले हम describe करेंगे globalization का phenomena, its, है ना, its genesis, its rise, है ना, उसका peak period कब था और waning कब से आया. तो its rise is in late 1980s, this era of globalization, because it is based on neoliberalism. Its का rise भी late 1980s से है. It reached its peak in the year 2000, in early 2000s. It reached its peak, जहाँ को उस phase को हम बोलते हैं hyper globalism. ठीक है. और उसके बाद 2007 to 2010 there is global financial crisis. उससे setback है to globalization. And the decline becomes perceptible since 2015 onwards. या ट्रम्प का, जब ट्रम्प इलेक्ट हो गए, वो भी हम बोल सकते हैं. ट्रम्प 2017 में फर्स्ट टाइम ही गॉट इलेक्टेड. 2017 marks the first term, beginning of first term of Elon Musk. Since then, Brexit happened in 2016. So all this, है ना, is an example of decline of globalization and reassertion of sovereign nationalism. Globalization was anchored in the belief of borderless world, but with waning of globalization, reassertion of national sovereignty. समझ में आ रहा है? इस तरह से लिंक करना पड़ेगा आंसर्स में, और जहाँ पे थोड़ा कंसेप्ट हमें पता है वहाँ पे हम मेंशन कर सकते हैं. तो वैनिंग ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन को पहले डिस्क्राइब करेंगे, एंड दैट इटसेल्फ कैन बिकम माय इंट्रोडक्शन. Yes, then post-Cold War world is becoming a site. So the present world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. There is reassertion of sovereign national identity. है ना. और ये हमें किस में दिख रहा है? sovereign national identity कहाँ कहाँ assert हो रही है? As I told you, economic sphere में where, है ना, there is imposition of tariffs. Yes, फिर geopolitical conflicts. Yes, Russia Ukraine war क्या है? Russia Ukraine war, once again, Russia Ukraine war is one of its kind war that has happened since World War II. That one nation going for complete attack on another sovereign nation. ऐसा कोई border skirmish नहीं है ना. तो यहाँ पे you have a geopolitical conflicts like Russia Ukraine war. It is about reassertion of sovereign nationalism. ठीक है. हम चाइना के भी border skirmishes पे बात कर सकते हैं. वो भी तो टेरिटोरियल गेन्स करना चाह रहा है. बॉर्डरलेस वर्ल्ड था, है ना, इंटरडिपेंडेंस की जगह आज के दिन दे आर गोइंग फॉर टेरिटोरियल एग्रेशन. बॉर्डर स्कर्मिशेस विथ इंडिया, है ना, टेरिटोरियल एग्रेशन इन साउथ चाइना सी, ये भी हम एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं जियोपॉलिटिकल कन्फ्लिक्ट्स में. यस, फिर एंटी इमाइग्रेंट पॉलिसीज. यस, ऑल दीज, है ना. अमेरिका first policy. All these are examples of reclaiming or rise of sovereign nationalism while globalization is in decline. Yes, let's see how we have written the answer. First, let me, in fact, this was, as I was telling you, this topic was in news. In fact, the current affairs magazine, monthly current affair magazine of February 2025, इसमें ये टॉपिक कवर हुआ था, जियो इकोनॉमिक फ्रैगमेंटेशन, क्योंकि इकोनॉमिक सर्वे इस बार बात कर रहा है फ्रॉम ग्लोबलाइजेशन वी आर एंटरिंग इनटू अ वर्ल्ड ऑफ जियो इकोनॉमिक फ्रैगमेंटेशन. तो अगर इकोनॉमिक सर्वे जो ये गवर्नमेंट डॉक्यूमेंट्स है, इफ दे टॉक अबाउट एनी सच फिनोमेना वी नीड टू पे हीड टू इट. Yes, so geo-economic fragmentation, and they have in this booklet, है ना, इसी टॉपिक के अंदर they have discussed from globalization to geo-economic fragmentation. Geo-economic fragmentation as claim of sovereign nationalism का एक part है, लेकिन है ना economic sphere में, but we have spoken about rise of globalization, peak है ना in 2000 to 2010, then there is globalization जो यहाँ पे हाइपर ग्लोबलाइजेशन है, उसके बाद 2007 टू 2010 जो ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस हो गया, उसके बाद स्लो डाउन है, एंड फाइनली फॉल ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन, है ना. तो अब ये रिलेटिव है. आई वुड से सिंस 2015 ऑफ कोर्स हैज़ बिकम वेरी वेरी परसेप्टेबल विथ द सेकेंड टर्म ऑफ ट्रम्प. यस, और 2015 से बोल सकते हैं क्योंकि क्रीमिया एनेक्सेशन बाय रशिया, ऑल सच थिंग्स क्या है, ये सॉवरेन नेशनलिज्म है ना. यू आर गोइंग एंड क्लेमिंग टेरिटरीज एट, है ना, तो ये सॉवरेन नेशनलिज्म का कंसेप्ट है, ना कि ग्लोबल इंटीग्रेशन का. फाइन, एनीवेज दिस इज हाउ वी हैव रिटन द प्रेजेंट एरा ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन विच बिगैन इन लेट 1980s इज बेस्ड इन neoliberal policies and powered by ICT revolution. It reached its peak in early 2000. It suffered a setback in 2007-10 global financial crisis, and within a few years, especially with election of President Trump in his first term, its waning began. Its decline began. However, it has become all the more perceptible in his second term. The recent trends, और अब हमें किससे दिख रहा है, the recent trends of economic protectionism, geopolitical rivalries and anti-immigrant policies and the rise of identity-based politics point out to the decline of globalization and reassertion of sovereign nationalism in the post-Cold War world. Basically, we are taking up words from the question itself, and that is the way to write good answers. Yes, challenging the borderless world concept under globalization, या challenging the borderless world of globalization भी कर सकते थे. Waning of globalization and rise of sovereign nationalism, shift from hyper globalization to nationalism. तो basically economic outcomes पे पहला point है disillusionment with unequal outcomes of post Cold War globalization is now driving many nations to shift away from free trade and cooperation towards reasserting national sovereignty and prioritizing domestic policies. For example, 2016 Brexit referendum demonstrated a major economy coming out, then America first strategy. Yes, weakening of multilateralism, WTO का जो appellate body है, that has been dysfunctional since 2019. Yes, UN के relevance पे question है. So global bodies like WTO, UN have struggled to contain the drift as nations put their own interest ahead of collaborative solution, and इनका appellate body has been dysfunctional since 2019 because US has blocked appointment to the dispute settlement mechanism. जो WTO का था वो बहुत important mechanism था. It was better even than the ICJ under the UN. ठीक है, तो UN was established in 1945 and as many cases that ICJ has tackled since 1945 is more or less equal to the number of cases tackled by the dispute settlement mechanism of WTO. तो ऐसा क्या खास था WTO के dispute settlement mechanism में that it became so very important? Because it was two-tiered. Yes, so you have a dispute, you go to the dispute settlement body, the case is heard, a judgment is given. If you are unhappy with the judgment, you could go and appeal to the appellate body. So this two-tiered approach made it quite relevant. But as US, under Trump, was disinterested in globalization, he blocked the appointment to the appellate panel. Yes, fine. Then there is a geopolitical fragmentation. Geopolitical rivalries के बारे में discussion है. Economic protectionism, tariffs getting imposed पे, है ना? तो annexation of Crimea, Russia, Ukraine war, all this we have mentioned. Conclusion क्या है? The post Cold War era's dream of hyper-connected, borderless world is yielding to a competitive, fragmented landscape defined by pronounced emphasis on national sovereignty, identity, and self-reliance. क्या सेकेंड पार्ट? इसमें साथ में क्लब कर दिया, एक्चुअली वैनिंग ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन इंट्रोडक्शन में कर दिया. कंक्लूजन में लिख सकते हैं, लेकिन अभी एक्चुअली ये कहना डिजिटल वर्ल्ड में मे बी अब, लेकिन उसमें भी है ना, यू फाइंड जैसे फेसबुक या इंस्टाग्राम या ट्विटर, बट देन आई थिंक सो चाइना हैज़ इट्स ओन सच प्लेटफॉर्म्स. यस, टेक्नो नेशनलिज्म इज ऑल्सो ऑन राइज ओनली, है ना. डेटा फ्लोज पे वगैरह पे काफ़ी डिबेट है फॉर दैट मैटर. एक ही इसमें है क्योंकि इसका कोई काउंटर इतना है नहीं, है ना. ये दिस इज़ अ परसेप्टेबल ट्रेंड एंड दिस इज़ व्हाट वी एक्सेप्ट गोइंग ऑन प्रेजेंटली. यस, ये हम ये कह सकते हैं कि यस, हाउएवर यू फाइंड दैट डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज हु हैव स्टेक इन मल्टीलैटरलिज्म लाइक इंडिया, है ना. पहले तो चाइना भी था फॉर दैट मैटर. इंडिया एंड चाइना वर बोथ एट वन पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम ट्राइंग टू सेव गार्ड द डिक्लाइन ऑफ मल्टीलैटरलिज्म. इसमें एक पॉइंट ये भी हो सकता है, US under Trump coming out of Paris Agreement, yes, coming out of WHO, yes, all this are example of deglobalization for that matter. Yes, so you can add that point under Trump 2.0 you find. तो इसका कोई ज़्यादा मेजर काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट होगा नहीं, बस हम ये लिख सकते हैं however for developing countries, है ना, sustaining multilateralism has been important, but we do see a perceptible trend towards deglobalization, है ना. US de-dollarization भी तो हो रहा है ना. तो ये सब क्या है? ये सब examples हैं of deglobalization. Yes, you can mention de-dollarization. अगर Trump is coming out of Paris Agreement, making WTO dysfunctional, the world is also imposing tariffs, the world is also, है ना, moving towards de-dollarization. तो अब you find कि अभी we are moving in an era of deglobalization. तो इसी वजह से rise of plurilaterals है या minilaterals का जो rise हो रहा है, because multilateralism is failing. Yes. इसमें हम चाहे, अब यही है, ये 10 नंबर का सवाल था. there is a limit to how much we can write, but you can talk about the manifestations. इसमें एक सब हेड आप चाहो तो डाल सकते हो, manifestation would be rise of far right या rightist parties and populist leaders, rise of minilaterals, है ना. These are manifestation of deglobalization. De-dollarization का जो trend है, it is a manifestation of deglobalization. Fine.
UPSC mains demands more than just knowledge. It requires the art of presenting that knowledge clearly, concisely, and convincingly on paper. Without the right approach, even well-prepared content can fall short. You need structured guidance to overcome bottlenecks and translate your preparation into well-structured, impactful answers. Vision IAS present a specially curated offline and online masterclasses for answer writing in Delhi. It offers 5 focus sessions to build strong answer writing fundamentals, craft impactful introductions and conclusions, use examples, data and illustrations effectively, practice through live demonstrations, receive personalized feedback on evaluated assignments, learn proven strategies from UPSC toppers. Attend the free orientation on 18th August, with the classes starting from 19th August at 5 p.m.
Fine. Next is energy security constitutes the dominant kingpin. And in fact, see, in these answers that I have written, I have not drawn flowcharts, but you can always draw flowcharts. तो impact को हमें शब्द नहीं मिल रहे, तो हम impact को ड्रॉ करके फ्लोचार्ट फॉर्मेट में ड्रॉ कर सकते हैं. रैमिफिकेशन, एक गोल बनाया और 4-5 रैमिफिकेशन बस पॉइंटर्स के थ्रू मेंशन कर दिया एरोस के थ्रू. नेक्स्ट इज energy security constitutes the dominant kingpin of India's foreign policy, and it is linked with India's overarching influence in Middle East countries. How would you integrate India's energy security with India's foreign policy trajectory in the coming years? Yes. This is the question. How would you integrate energy security with India's foreign policy trajectories? बट सेंटेंस जो जिसको जब भी कोई सवाल है और वो सेंटेंस से शुरू होगा तो दैट सेंटेंस नीड्स टू बी सब्सटैंशिएटेड. यस, एंड सब्सटैंशिएशन में हाउ एंड वाई दोनों आंसर करते हैं. और ये जो सेंटेंस है इंडियाज एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स द डोमिनेंट किंग पिन ऑफ इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी, ये पहला सेंटेंस है. दूसरा, इट इज़ लिंक्ड विथ इंडियाज ओवरआर्किंग इन्फ्लुएंस in the Middle East. So this sentence comes in 2 parts. So we will have to elaborate both the parts as part of our substantiation. Fine. So we will substantiate. जब भी also the question begins with a statement, introduction will be substantiation of the given statement. Yes, so substantiation of the statement will become our introduction as such. But यहाँ पे 2 पार्ट में है तो हम इतना बड़ा तो इंट्रोडक्शन नहीं हो सकता हमारा, तो वी विल पिक अप कीवर्ड्स. तो हम इंट्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं बाय डिफाइनिंग एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी एंड हाउ इट इज़ एन इम्पॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी ऑब्जेक्टिव, और वी कैन डिफाइन फॉरेन पॉलिसी एंड देन से हाउ एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव. यस, ईदर वेज. ठीक है, यही 2 कीवर्ड्स हैं, एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी ऑफ इंडियाज़ फॉरेन पॉलिसी. तो इन दोनों में से कुछ भी हम उठाकर वी कैन डिफाइन इट इन आवर ओन वर्ड्स एंड देन लिंक इट टू हाउ एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी एंड फॉरेन पॉलिसी आर रिलेटेड. सो इंट्रोडक्शन क्या है? एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी रेफर्स टू reliable availability of energy at affordable prices, essential for economic stability, growth and national security. For India, energy security is central to India's foreign policy. Why? Because growing energy demand, limited domestic energy resources and reliance on imports. तो इसीलिए हमारा foreign objective है energy security. Or the other way we can do it, we define foreign policy. What is foreign policy? It is a course of action chosen by a nation to fulfill its national interest. Yes, it is a course of action and a predetermined course of action chosen by a nation to fulfill its national interest. Now, for an emerging economy which is energy scarce, energy security becomes one of its core national interest, and therefore foreign policy is aimed at securing energy security. Yeah, energy security becomes the central theme of India's foreign policy. Kingpin मतलब pivotal, central theme. समझ में आ रहा है? Yes or no? है ना? तो उसी को लिंक करना है कि हाँ, हम एनर्जी स्कैर्स नेशन है, इमर्जिंग इकोनॉमी है विद एवर ग्रोइंग एनर्जी नीड्स है. इसी वजह से एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी इज़ द की थीम ऑफ इंडियाज़ फॉरेन पॉलिसी. सो दैट फर्स्ट पार्ट वी हैव elaborated. The second part, India's overarching influence in Middle Eastern countries. अब इंडिया का ओवरआर्किंग इन्फ्लुएंस क्यों है इन मिडल ईस्टर्न कंट्रीज़? अब है कि नहीं है वो डिबेटेबल है, लेकिन सेंटेंस कह रहा है कि है, तो हमें उसको एक्सेप्ट करते हुए वी हैव टू गिव रीजंस कि हाँ हमारा है. तो व्हाट इज़ द रीज़न? इंडिया इज़ अ लार्ज मार्केट ऑफ एनर्जी इम्पोर्ट्स एंड दीज आर एनर्जी एक्सपोर्टिंग नेशंस. देन सेकेंडली, and India is also a large market in itself. In fact, these Middle Eastern countries have theological bond with Pakistan. So traditionally they have been more supportive towards Pakistan. But with India's economic rise, they realize attractiveness of Indian market and therefore they are, है ना, they are seeking to engage with India. तो इसीलिए मैंने यहाँ पे say compared to पाकिस्तान कर दिया उसको. Yes, India is an important destination for investments, which is an important source of economic diversification for the Middle Eastern countries. And the Middle Eastern countries, since 2010, Arab Spring, have been actively wanting to economically diversify. और उनके पास डाइवर्सिफिकेशन के लिए उनके पास बहुत पैसे हैं, सॉवरेन वेल्थ फंड्स हैं उनके पास जो आइडल पड़ा है. तो नाउ दे आर सीकिंग टू इन्वेस्ट दैट मनी इन फॉरेन कंट्रीज टू अर्न बेटर रिटर्न्स. Yes, so वहाँ पे भी India becomes an important destination nation. For example, जब Mohammed bin Salman had come to India, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he promised $100 billion of investment in India. Yes, India also has strategic partnership with important Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, etc. Yes, so this shows that India has overarching influence in Middle Eastern countries. Now integrating India's energy security with India's future foreign policy. See, I would say यहाँ पे तो मैंने ये नहीं किया है, but I would say you can start this discussion by discussing how this linkage has come to be. क्या है India's energy security with India's future foreign policy. तो वहाँ पे यू ब्रिंग आउट, क्योंकि कंटेक्स्ट इस सवाल का यही है, दिस एंटायर डिस्कोर्स ऑफ इंडिया इंपोर्टिंग ऑयल फ्रॉम रशिया. सो यू कैन से दैट यस, सिंस एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी इज एन की एलिमेंट ऑफ इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी ऑब्जेक्टिव, इंडिया हैज since US imposed, US and Europe has imposed, US has imposed, US and Europe has imposed sanctions on Russia. Yes, with the Russia-Ukraine war, India since 2022 has increased its oil imports from Russia substantially. And prior to the war, India used to import more or less 2% of its oil imports from Russia, which has risen to 35 to 40% presently. Yes, and this has also become, है ना, a friction point between India and US. ठीक है, वहाँ पे ये एक 2 लाइन लिख के या एक सेंटेंस में लिख के उसके बाद you can start how should we carry forward securing our energy security with future foreign policy trajectory. Diversify energy sources. Do not be dependent on any one nation because the world is very, very uncertain. है ना, deglobalization या decline of multilateralism का एक phenomena है कि the world is becoming more and more chaotic. Yes, to reduce dependency on on the Middle East or any country for that sort, India must strengthen its energy ties with regions like Africa, Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific, and we are doing so. Focus on renewable energy. Yes, so India's increasing focus on green diplomacy, international solar alliance and all such thing that we are doing. Yes, multilateral engagement. India must continue to engage in global forums to strengthen energy security, foster international cooperation on energy sustainability. इसमें हम एक और एग्जाम्पल डाल सकते हैं सिविल न्यूक्लियर कोऑपरेशन का. ठीक है, एक और हम क्या लिख सकते हैं, सिविल न्यूक्लियर कोऑपरेशन, जिसको हम रिवाइटलाइज करना चाह रहे थे बिटवीन इंडिया एंड यूएस, है ना. तो सिविल न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी पे कोऑपरेट करेंगे तो उसके वजह से क्या होगा, एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी विल बी बोल्स्टर्ड वंस अगेन. Fine. So while Middle East remains vital for India's energy security, the focus needs to shift towards diversification and sustainability through enhanced global and regional partnership. Yes, and the last question, the reform process in UN remains unresolved because of the delicate imbalance of East and West and entanglement of US versus Russo-Chinese alliance. Yes, तो क्या है, द रिफॉर्म प्रोसेस इन यूएन रिमेन्स अनरिजॉल्व्ड, व्हाई, बिकॉज ऑफ द डेलिकेट इम्बैलेंस बिटवीन ईस्ट एंड वेस्ट। यही इसी को अलग शब्द में कहा जा रहा है यूएस वर्सेस रसो चाइनीज अलायंस। इट इज़ बेसिकली P2 वर्सेस P3 डिवाइड जो हम पढ़ते आ रहे हैं in UNSC, which creates hurdle for the reform process, UN reform process. Yes, examine this statement and critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontation in this regard. ठीक है, तो अब सवाल क्या है, evaluate East-West policy confrontations. ये important है. Yes, so we don't just need to point out कि yes, there is P2 versus P3 divide. We have to tell exactly on which issues, on which policy matters there is this divide between the two, and what is the position taken by the P2 countries versus the P3 countries. Fine. Are you all following? Yes. तो अभी the reform process of UN remains unresolved. अब इसका इंट्रोडक्शन क्या लिखोगे? इंट्रोडक्शन में फिर से हमें सब्सटैंशिएट करना है स्टेटमेंट जो दिया गया है, लेकिन अभी हम इसका इंट्रोडक्शन कैसे करें? क्वेश्चन है यूएन रिफॉर्म प्रोसेस, है ना, तो हम सीधा बता सकते हैं कि यूएन रिफॉर्म हैज़ बीन अ मेकिंग ऑफ लॉन्ग टाइम, या तो हम ऐसे बोले कि हाँ है ना, यूएन 1990s onwards there has been this idea that UN needs to reform itself because the world order has changed. Yes, and this idea was bolstered further in the year or in early 2000 with rise of countries like India and China on the world map. या तो हम थोड़ा factual ये हो रहा है introduction, या इसको हम देखो introduction में जहाँ पे हो सके हम context ले आएँ तो वो बेहतर introduction हो जाता है. Yes, if we can bring comparisons between say India versus China, India versus US, it becomes better. And context comparisons or ironies and paradoxes also if you can bring, and it becomes interesting. We want to give a relevant but interesting introduction, and which shows little depth in our understanding of things. So the question is on UN reform. I can start my introduction by saying that reform is very, very essential to maintain the relevance of UN. Yes, presently UN's relevance is under question, and its relevance can only be maintained if we reform the UN. However, this very process is blocked because of the East-West debate. या फिर हम यहीं से we'll borrow it from the sentence, because of the delicate imbalance between East and West and US Russo-China alliance. Fine. So we can introduce that way, then mention briefly about the reforms which are needed in the UN. So UNSC reform and a membership reform, a veto reform under UNSC, strengthening of UN General Assembly vis-a-vis UNSC to make UN more democratic. Yes, उसके अलावा UN Charter reform है, UN Financial reform है. Yes, ये सब हम पढ़ते हैं. तो ये आप मेंशन कर सकते हो, जो रिफॉर्म आपको पता है जो यूएन में लेना ज़रूरी है उन पे आप बातें कर सकते हो. Yes, then examine the unresolved UN reform process due to East-West confrontation with focus on P2 versus P3 and a US versus Russo-Chinese alliance. Do you understand when I say P2 versus P3? P2 कौन है? रशिया एंड चाइना. P3 कौन है? US, फ्रांस एंड यूके. यस, ठीक है. फिर क्रिटिकली इवेलुएट द सेम कि क्या ये रिफॉर्म प्रोसेस सिर्फ इसी वजह से रुका हुआ है इन दोनों के, है ना, P2 वर्सेस P3 डिवाइड की वजह से, या और भी कोई फैक्टर्स हैं. यस, एंड कंक्लूड अकॉर्डिंगली. फाइन. फाइन. सो इंट्रोडक्शन. UN was established on 24th October 1945 as an institution of global governance to ensure global peace and security. But presently, in context of various ongoing geopolitical conflicts, serious questions are raised on its relevance. It is in this context its reform is critical, but the reform process remains unresolved due to East-West confrontation between US-led Western Bloc and Russo-Chinese alliance. Fine. So this is how we have introduced. Yes, key reforms demanded expansion of UNSC membership, veto power ka regulation, inclusive representation of Global South, strengthening General Assembly role vis-a-vis UNSC, ensure diversified and predictable funding sources. Yes, and UN Charter reform. Charter में अभी भी there is reference to enemy states vis-a-vis say Germany and Japan in context of World War II. So that reference needs to be removed. Yes, East-West policy confrontation क्या है अब, है ना, on various issues. तो vis-a-vis the issue of UNSC veto, you find that P2 do not agree with the views of P3. Yes, तो P3 का क्या व्यू है, US and the Western Bloc, इसको हम सीधा P3 भी लिख सकते थे. वहाँ पे ब्रैकेट में पहले जब हमने इंट्रोडक्शन दिया वहीं पे P3 कर दो, फिर उसके बाद आंसर्स में P3 says that they support selective expansion for G4 nations without veto. है ना, तो P3 countries support G4's expansion. Further, it calls for curbing veto misuse. In fact, there are initiatives like France-Mexico political declaration to voluntarily refrain from using veto in case of genocide, crime against humanity and war crimes. तो ये कहते हैं कि वीटो का मिसयूज, वीटो का रेगुलेटेड यूज हो, हर जगह वीटो ना यूज कर पाए, दैट इज ऑल्सो फाइन. Yes, at least that is what. See, US per se does not say so. And US is a very self-interested nation, but anyways, and other countries, UK, France, they are of the point of view that yes, we can accept regulated use of veto. But who जो बिल्कुल नहीं मानते of regulated use is in fact Russia and increasingly China. In fact, the veto power in UNSC was introduced on the demand of the then USSR. Otherwise, there was no plan to have veto power given to the P5 countries. It was on demand of USSR that veto power was introduced. So Russia presently, which is the heir country of USSR, is not willing to let go of the veto power at all. Yes, so both safeguard the status quo to protect the P5 privileges. China blocks India and Japan. G4 में ये allow नहीं करते, citing rivalries, while Russia and China defend the veto as a sovereignty shield against Western interventions. ठीक है, इसी वजह से USSR ने डिमांड किया था वीटो टू सेफगार्ड इटसेल्फ फ्रॉम वेस्टर्न इंटरवेंशन. तो चाइना को भी यही फियर है, तो दे डिमांड वीटो as a shield against Western intervention. For example, Russia vetoed UNSC resolutions on Ukraine and Syria. Impact क्या है इसका? This disagreement का there is a deadlock vis-a-vis charter-based reform. Yes, next deadlock किस पे है? Peacekeeping पे. Yes, so what is the Western approach? They advocate for multi-dimensional peacekeeping. They want a broader mandate for the peacekeeping forces, even including use of force at times. ठीक है? They peacekeeping का मतलब क्या है? They are just there to maintain ceasefire. They should not engage in offensive action. But the Western countries have proposed a broader mandate which includes use of offensive force by the peacekeeping if needed. Yes, they want strong mandate to protect civilians, support democratization and monitor human rights, and even conduct offensive operations. Yes, for example, this intervention. Then you have Russo-Chinese approach. They want soft peacekeeping. And they want narrower mandate limited to just maintenance of ceasefire. They emphasize on consent of the nation. Basically ये interventionist approach है इनका non-interventionist approach है ना, क्योंकि इनको डर है कि intervention कौन करेगा? Western powers करेंगे. Eastern countries इतना intervention नहीं करेंगे इन दूसरे देशों में, है ना. They are fearful of intervention. They emphasize host state consent, non-use of force, strict respect for sovereignty. It opposes mandates that blur the line between peacekeeping and intervention. Yes, in Syria and Russia, China opposed intrusive humanitarian peacekeeping resolutions. The next area of disagreement is vis-a-vis CCIT, Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, which originally was proposed by the Rajiv Gandhi government. Yes, in 1996. Not Rajiv Gandhi government, it was proposed by India in 1996. Yes, so Western position क्या है? It pushes for universal definition of terrorism that criminalizes all non-state armed violence. इनका ये important है, non-state, क्योंकि अगर state armed violence ले लेंगे तो US itself will become a terrorist actor, क्योंकि उन्होंने इतना intervention किया है foreign देशों में. Yes, so they emphasize on all non-state armed intervention without exception. Russo-Chinese opposition, they insist on distinguishing terrorism from legitimate struggles for self-determination, like Palestine, the Kashmir issue. Yes, so impact is over the past 2 decades, CCIT remains stalled in UN General Assembly, reflecting East-West polarization. Fine. Now these were the 3 major areas है ना जहाँ पे इनका dispute है, peacekeeping, veto के position पे and CCIT पे. Now critical evaluation क्या है? East-West clash clearly underpins the reform stalemate, but internal global South is also split. है ना, जैसे कि इंडिया वर्सेस चाइना, ब्राज़ील वर्सेस अर्जेंटीना, है ना, चाइना opposes India's candidature, Argentina opposes Brazil's candidature, and UN charters rigidity in itself also blocks progress. कि special vote है ना, special majority का जो requirement है. The rise of parallel institutions where Western powers engage through platforms like G7 and NATO, and while Russia and China deepen BRICS and SCO, further weaken the incentive for reform and compromise on the UN framework. Yes, so UN सिर्फ ईस्ट वेस्ट के डिवाइड की वजह से नहीं, but within the global south is also split. Plus you have other organizations that have been set up which do away with the inclination to compromise as far as UN reform process is concerned. Fine, so you find that this is the reason that the UN reform process is not moving ahead. Now conclusion क्या है? Unless these rivalries are transcended and the global south led by countries like India gain greater voice in shaping outcomes, the UN risks stagnation, unable to respond to 21st century governance challenges. Yes, genuine reform demands bridging ideological divides, revitalizing consensus and prioritizing common good over maintenance of the 1945 power structure. है ना, UNSC जब P5 countries है वो क्या represent करते हैं? The 1945 power structure. है ना, तो यही conclusion है कि you have to get over these differences to revitalize UN, otherwise UN will suffer. है ना, UN will become stagnant as a global platform. हाँ, ईस्ट वेस्ट में P2 वर्सेस P3 की ही बात हो रही है, क्योंकि वो खुद ही बता रहे हैं ना, यूएस वर्सेस रसो चाइनीज अलायंस. तो इनफैक्ट हमने तो यूएस को एक्सपैंड कर दिया, फ्रांस और यूके भी ले आए. यस, ईस्ट वेस्ट डिवाइड यही है. अगर ये सवाल को देखें कि ये सवाल इस बार आया है, तो वी कैन थिंक of another question, north south divide as far as climate change diplomacy, and in fact a question on it was asked in 2022. But it continues to be relevant, and you should, as part of your preparation, prepare north south divide on climate change diplomacy. Fine, fine. That is it from my end. Any questions that you want to ask? Yes. Yes, so we understood the context from which these questions have come, and we have tried to find answers. Of course, these are model answers. These are answers from my perspective. There can be other perspectives. You can frame the answers in different ways. However, the basic content, the basic idea, the basic framework will remain more or less similar. ठीक है, इन्हीं line पे आप answers लिखना है. Yes, on that note, thank you.